Hello, and welcome to this episode of Felonious, a podcast where we discuss the realm of true crime. From chilling cold cases to the wild and wacky, we'll explore it all with a perfect blend of seriousness and humour. My name is Emma.
And I'm Nazia. To keep up to date with what's coming up, be sure to follow us on Instagram at felonious.pod and visit our website feloniouspod.com. We hope you enjoy this episode, so let's get to it. We have time for banter today.
Yeah, back to bants.
Yeah. Hopefully, because today's going to be a short episode.
So am I kicking things off then?
Yeah, you start.
Okay. So I found this one today and it was published this week in the Metro. This happened in the US, in Louisiana, and a mischief of rats broke into an evidence room of a police station and got high on confiscated marijuana. The weed was stored in a dilapidated room that was also home to cockroaches and was riddled with mould. The police superintendent, Anne Kirkpatrick, told New Orleans City Council, "The rats are eating our marijuana. They're all high." Experts said that the rats would have experienced the same effects as humans do from weed.
Can they OD on weed?
Can you OD on weed?
Well, I figured because they're rats, they're quite small.
Yeah, possibly.
So the ratio, I don't know. Especially if they're eating it, that's got to have some digestive issues.
Yeah, they probably won't feel very good in the morning.
No, I imagine not.
But I didn't realise a group of rats was called a mischief.
I didn't know that either, but that makes sense.
Yeah, they were up to mischief.
Okay, but I mean, also, ew at the state of this room.
Yeah, officers inside the building were complaining of rats' feces on their desks when they arrived to work in the morning.
Ew.
But the whole reason this superintendent brought this topic up was so that they could get money for refurbishing their headquarters.
Right. Okay, and all it took was for the rats to start eating evidence or confiscated items to, push that forward.
Turns out they stole a load of cocaine and sold that on as well.
Oh, dear. Oh, no, I don't want to imagine rats on cocaine either.
Rat drug dealers.
Yeah. Rat addicts. Oh, that's gross. Poor rats.
Yeah. So, what you have a find this week?
Yeah, I only know about this because Alex told me about it. And I can't remember why we had this conversation, but he's giving me a funny look now because he can't remember the conversation, but maybe he will. So, in Italy, he remembers now. So, yeah, there was a barber shop in Italy that was actually dealing drugs, and the only reason they got caught out was because they had loads of bald customers going in.
Bald as in no hair, not bored out of their minds.
No, sorry, it's my Cockney accent. So, yeah, customers without hair going into barbers, and it drew suspicion from law enforcement.
I didn't think to put on toupees or wigs.
No, I know. They didn't even have beards. So they had no hair around. I mean, to be fair, the barbers could have covered their backs if they offered a waxing service. So at least the bald customers could have said, well, I've got a hairy back.
Yeah, I'm going in there to get my chest done.
It's not very clever drug operation. I'm just trying to skim through the article because it's quite long. Well, it's not that long, but it's very wordy.
Oh, so they uncovered quantities of hashish
and
then found a bunch of cocaine.
Yeah. So, the 55-year-old barber was covertly running the drug trade within the facade of a barber shop. But, I mean, what a way to get caught. That's very, very silly.
Surely they must have thought that it was a bit dodgy, like going in there and having no hair and... I don't know, I guess... Oh. Yeah, because what else would you get done in a barber's if you have no hair other than a shave?
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I said. They should have offered like back waxing or back crack and sack.
Oh no.
I mean, you can get bald men that have hairy bodies. I'm sure they exist. Are you Googling?
No. Oh, so I was looking for other bald people stories that could,
oh, okay.
You know.
I thought you were Googling if bald people have hairy bodies.
No, my Google search history is weird, but not that weird. Oh, for God's sake, it's on a Telegraph article and you have to pay to read it all.
Oh.
But it says, wanted bald man caught because he queued for a haircut. Suspicions grew when hairless 46-year-old was spotted queuing for a trim in Nottingham before being arrested by police.
But what was he wanted for?
Shoplifting. Police caught a prolific shoplifter who had tried to evade arrest by hiding in a barber's, despite being bald.
That is probably the worst place to put yourself in if you're trying to hide from the police. Seriously. Gosh.
Oh.
Yeah, you couldn't make this up really, could you?
No. Well, we haven't.
No. Anyway. Moving on to bald people.
Yeah, moving on to...
he is bald, isn't he? Thomas Quick. Sture.
Partially bald?
Yeah. He's like a Larry David bald.
Yeah, I don't know what you call partially bald people. Like, can you call them bald? If they've got, like, side hair and back hair?
Yeah, I think so. I'm only going by the standards of Larry David, because he always goes on about his baldness in Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got a bit of hair. He's not 100% bald.
Mm.
I'm sure there's like a ratio of skin to hair, and if you pass a certain point,
yeah,
you're classed as bald.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we? No offense to any of our listeners who
No, we love all listeners with hair or without hair.
Yeah.
Or with partial hair.
Exactly.
But if you do know what you're called, then please let us know.
Should we move on before we dig ourselves any deeper graves here?
Yeah, the power of editing. So in today's episode, we will discuss the investigation done by Hannes Råstam into Thomas Quick and how it led to confessions being retracted and sentences being quashed. We take a further look behind Thomas Quick's therapy and reactions from those involved in the investigations to what Hannes uncovered for his documentary. Part 1 and 2 are available to listen to now, so make sure you listen to them first, otherwise you might be a bit confused about things we are going to discuss today.
Yes. As usual, we will be discussing the topics of murder, child and sexual abuse, cannibalism, drug use, alcoholism. I feel like my Swedish pronunciations are getting there. Probably not.
No, they're good. They're sometimes better than mine.
No, you're being too kind.
Your Swedish pronunciations are better than my French and English, so...
Okay, if you say so. But yeah, so the research that we've done has been taken from Hannes Råstam's book, Thomas Quick, The Making of a Serial Killer, the film for documentary Confessions of Thomas Quick, and Dan Josephson's book, The Strange Case of Thomas Quick. And then Emma's also watched a Swedish television documentary called The Murders of Apuyura. I've forgotten how to pronounce it.
Yeah, you did it.
There you go.
You can do it.
Oh, gosh. I can't wait for this to be over. Sorry.
Well, I hope the listeners aren't thinking the same thing.
It's just saying the Scandinavian is just, it's hard work for me.
Yeah, it's hard work for me too. Before meeting Thomas Quick, Hannes Råstam contacted Jan Olsen, who was a retired detective chief inspector. We mentioned him briefly in part 2. He worked on both the cases of the Stigahuses and Jenna Livy. Jan was convinced that Quick was wrongly convicted and published articles about his opinion. He said that evidence to contradict what Quick admitted to was never pursued or examined. The same prosecutor, Van der Kwast, was in charge of all investigations, and there was only one interrogator. Quick's lawyer didn't question the evidence presented in court, so there was a collapse in the judicial system. When Hannes met with Quick, he showed him photographs during their meeting, including one of a woman who he said was the only woman he had had sex with. Hannes then realised that Quick had confessed to having intercourse with his victim Gry Storvik. So did he just show he wasn't guilty? Hannes Råstam decided to make a documentary about Thomas Quick. Hannes was able to get hold of Sture's medical records and his personal diaries and correspondence to help him make his documentary. And when I say Sture, I do mean Thomas Quick. He is Sture Bergwall.
Yeah, he took his name back, didn't he?
Yeah. Hannes and his team were able to get a mobile phone for Sture in order to keep in touch. They were even able to get a pro bono lawyer, Thomas Olsen, who Hannes knew from a previous case. Hannes spoke to people who worked on Quick's cases and those involved with his psychiatric care. Going
back to the only woman he had sex with, was that the one that was mentioned in part 2?
Yeah, I believe so.
Ex-girlfriend. Yeah. So it's coming back to me now. But yeah, I mean, that's a big red flag, isn't it? When he's only had sex with one woman, but he's been convicted of raping one of his supposed victims.
Yeah, but the DNA didn't match anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the raw footage from the reconnaissance trips were given to Hannes Råstam in 2008 by someone who had worked on the investigation. Hannes noticed that Thomas Quick seemed an altogether different person. His eyes rolled about, he had a crazed expression, and his speech seemed totally different, sluggish, and he couldn't formulate words at all. In the Confessions of Thomas Quick documentary, they show a couple of those clips, and it's actually quite disturbing.
Yeah.
To see the state he's in.
Yeah, you can quite clearly see that he's drugged up.
Yeah. And going through,
a crisis.
Yeah. A care assistant gave Quick a Xanax and said, "Is one enough? Shouldn't you have another one right away?" Sven Orker Christiansen advised investigators that Quick should have unlimited access to narcotic strength medication, including Xanax. So Xanax is a tranquilizer that is classified as a narcotic, a type known as benzodiazepine. It's very addictive and it can cause serious side effects. When Quick was asked about where Teresa's body was, he started to wave his arms and said things that didn't make sense, but the police still followed what he said. For example, Seppo Penttinen said, when arriving at a crossing, that Quick had to decide the way and asked him if they should go to the right, to which he nodded, and so they went towards the right. The place that Quick took them to did not in any way match his earlier descriptions. But Quick got out of the car accompanied by Penttinen, his therapist, his lawyer, Claes Borgström, and another detective, and they go to the top of a hill that Quick spotted from inside the car. Quick had to be held because he was so unsteady on his feet, and it was obvious to Hannes, who was watching the footage, that this had been done before. Quick then pointed them to another area where he completely freaked out. He started to shout, "You bastard," over and over again and stamped the ground and thrashed his arms. He was wrestled to the ground by police and care assistants. Then Quick started to take on another personality, which he and his therapist referred to as Ellington. His therapist tried to get through to him by calling him by his real name, Sture. He then finally calmed down and said that Teresa's body was somewhere in the forest, which was too vague for Penttinen, and he demanded more information. Quick then pointed to a pond, and he and his entourage walked towards it. Quick was walking with great difficulty and had to be supported as he was given more Xanax. He was not making much sense, and he confused a detective for his twin sister.
So a year into this murder investigation, the police wanted to do another reconstruction. But because Quick was so anxious and it was getting too much for him, they decided to do it in another location in Sweden that looked similar to the Norwegian forest, so that Quick could have an easier time of it. Penttinen took a camera with him, and Quick was pretending that he was in the Norwegian forest. He was regressing back to the murder of Therese, and he said he could see where Therese's body was. Penttinen was all the while taking photographs as evidence, even though they were in the wrong country. Sven Åke Christiansen, the memory expert, and Birgitte Ståhle, the therapist, were also present during this. And they mentioned this in the documentary as well.
Yeah.
And some of the experts are like, how were they allowed to do this?
Yeah. Hannes Råstam wrote in his book, "It was difficult to accept that these highly educated representatives of a range of academic disciplines had not seen through the performance. From the reports and videos Hannes had seen of Quick, he was convinced that Quick had not murdered Theresa. Hannes saw Quick after seeing the videos and expressed his concerns about how Quick was heavily drugged and didn't seem to know where he was, and Hannes said that he didn't know what the truth was. Quick then asked if it was true that he didn't murder Theresa, what could he do about it? Hannes then saw Quick the next day, and he confessed that he didn't commit any of the murders he was convicted for, and the ones he confessed to. Sture said to Hannes that when he first arrived at Sture Psychiatric Hospital in 1991, he had hopes of understanding himself better and gaining insights into his mental health. One of the doctors on the ward asked Sture to talk about his childhood, and Sture realised that he didn't have any particular memories. So he decided to make up memories, traumatic ones, which gained him more attention and more drugs. Sture was addicted to benzodiazepines when he arrived at Sture, and the dosages increased because of the memories he was reliving in therapy. The more I told them, the more benzo I got. In the end, I practically had free access to medicines, to narcotics. Because that's how you go about treating a psychiatric patient.
Yeah, just give them the drugs that they asked for.
Yeah. Throughout the confessions and murder investigations, Sture was on a high prescription of narcotic drugs. He maintained that the use of the medications he was on was never discussed with his lawyer, Claes Borgström. In 2001, the new chief physician, Göran Kjellberg, decided Sture should stop the benzodiazepine, but, understandably, Sture was terrified about having withdrawal symptoms. When Hannes Råstam spoke to Göran, the retired physician alluded to a cover-up of a miscarriage of justice. Sture's medication was so high that it had to be reduced incrementally over a period of 8 months. He also stopped having therapy as his medication ceased. He had nothing to talk about, no memories. But Sture has no clear memories of his time as Thomas Quick, which is one of the side effects of benzos. Göran Kjellberg said, "It is beyond any doubt that his statements in court will have been affected. I would not trust anyone who consumed these substances on such a scale." On some occasions, Quick was allowed leave from Sture Hospital and would take trips to Stockholm. He went to a library there and read articles about Thomas Blomgren, the boy that Quick had supposedly murdered when he was a teenager in 1964. Quick made a note of important facts. He went to such lengths to dupe the police, which seemed unbelievable to Hannes Råstam. But it was all about getting credibility for Sture and becoming an interesting patient for his therapists.
When Quick recanted his confessions, he demanded that Birgitte Ståhle pass over their therapy session notes, but she said she had destroyed them all since he stopped therapy in 2002. There is also a letter she had written to Seppo Penttinen to say that she had tidied away all of her notes. Serte Hospital withdrew what they called fresh air outings and took the blinds away from Quick's room, so he had no privacy and no protection from direct sunlight. His form of entertainment, like books and CDs, were also taken away. But when he was packing his books away, Quick found the manuscript of a book that Birgitte Sture had written about Quick with another therapist, Margit Norell. In it was everything that had happened in Quick's therapy sessions. Margit Norell was born in 1914. She was considered as a rebel within the field of psychoanalysis and managed to get work within Serte Hospital as an external consultant in the 1980s. She was the supervisor for the head doctor. She put her work first before her family, leaving the care of her children to a maid. In her own childhood, she was mostly alone as her parents were rarely at home. She would mostly stay with her old-fashioned Victorian grandmother. Dan Josephson interviewed her daughter Annie for his book, and she described her mother as being isolated and she couldn't socialise as well as other people. She was incapable of small talk. She had practically no friends. Margit studied psychoanalysis in 1951, at the time when it was still a relatively new discipline. In 1968, she helped set up the Institute for Holistic Psychotherapy and Psychoanalysis, which through its membership aimed to train holistic psychotherapy to people in medicine or psychology and allow them to conduct psychotherapist treatments on patients. Margit took on 20 pupils at the Institute. She was invited to events worldwide and met many of the leading psychoanalysts at the time. Many came to Sweden to hold seminars at the Holistic Institute, but they didn't see the big problem behind its facade. The group of psychoanalysts she controlled were like a group of siblings, fighting for Margit's attention and admiration. Jan Stenson, a psychoanalyst, had been one of Margit's patients. Jan joined Margit at the Institute and was under her tutelage. Every week, the pair would discuss the other members of the group. Margit would criticise their colleagues, point out their weaknesses, and tell their secrets, breaking their confidentiality. Jan became increasingly uncomfortable with this, and soon realised that Margit was leaking personal information about him as well. If she did this to her colleagues, did she do this to her patients? Yes, she spoke to nearly all of her patients, and even her daughter about what Thomas Quick revealed in his therapy sessions. Margit would often get her inexperienced colleagues to see seriously mentally ill patients to try and make their problems disappear. Her approach to therapy was to make a parent bond with the patients so that they would feel secure enough to discuss traumatic childhood events and how that related to their mental state in adult life. This is what she taught her inexperienced colleagues. However, this didn't work in a lot of cases, and a lot of patients committed suicide. Margit placed the responsibility for the suicides on her colleagues, as they had not gone deep enough during their therapy or didn't work intensely enough with the patient's childhood traumas. Her colleagues grew hostile towards her and refused to attend therapy and supervision sessions. By 1972, just as she was experiencing difficulties with her group at the Institute, she accepted a request from a student at Serte Hospital to become a supervisor and help treat a chronically ill schizophrenic patient. After the successful treatment of this patient, Margit retained her post at the hospital. She was now able to use psychotherapy to treat schizophrenics. By 1975, Margit was a supervisor of a group of therapists at Serte. In 1976, the Holistic Institute asked her to resign from her post as the members of her group were gradually taking tasks away from her. One of the group members said that the group became more and more like a sect. There was an insistence on all of the group members to think the same. There was no freedom of expression, and Margit dictated everything. Dan Josephson wrote that all of the 9 psychotherapists he spoke to provided evidence of the group's sectarian mentality. She controlled her pupils by boosting their self-esteem and then destroying it at will. Margit had a strong influence on the psychiatric care at Serte and led a team of therapists, including Birgitte Sture and Kjell Persson. Another psychologist who was part of the Norell group said that Norell would often be referred to as a mother by the apprentice psychologists. She wanted all group members to be obedient, and no one dared criticise her for fear of being kicked out of the group. A member of her group of therapists said, Margit could not take criticism. Any suggestion that she was wrong made her feel humiliated. She became defensive and a little paranoid. Göran Kjellberg was a part of this group too, when he was the director of the entire forensic psychiatry department at Serte. And he was the one who decided to withdraw benzodiazepines from Sture Bergwall. His view on how psychiatric care should be conducted was considered radical at the time, as he wanted to offer psychotherapy to the criminals at the hospital, who were just heavily medicated and kept under lock and key. In 1983, a famous criminal, Lars Inge Andersson, became a patient at Serte, and Göran Kjellberg decided that he should undergo psychotherapeutic treatment. Kjellberg was a psychiatrist, but he had no training or experience within psychotherapy, so he asked Margit to supervise him, and she agreed. In 1984, Birgitte Sture came to Serte, first as a trainee, and then she was given a permanent position in 1985. Margit took care of Birgitte's psychotherapy training with weekly supervision from 1988. Margit asked both Birgitte and Kjellberg to join her group of therapists, where they gave seminars detailing their work at Serte Hospital. They were both admired in the group. Kjellberg was so happy with his progress with Lars Inge Andersson that he decided to renovate the psychiatric care at the hospital, using Margit's theoretical and clinical models. In 1989, a new wing of the hospital was opened to facilitate this. Birgitte Sture was appointed as the psychologist in the new unit. Kjellberg was so proud of his patient, Andersson's progress, that he applied for clemency for his patient. Everyone at the hospital thought the criminal had reformed, but in 1990, during one of his permitted outings, he vanished and robbed a garage and burgled the home of a colonel and took a number of weapons from him. He had also tied up a woman in the ward that he was in Serte Hospital. As the ward was unstaffed, nobody noticed. This was blasted all over the newspapers and rocked Margit's desire for recognition. Lars Inge was discharged in 1992 and straight away robbed a bank in Stockholm. He was arrested 2 days after being discharged. The media again ridiculed the hospital, and it was hit so hard that it nearly shut down. Then Margit met Sture Bergwall, who would be seen as the saviour of Serte. And Lars Inge Andersson was also represented by Gunnar Lundgren, who represented Quick in the Jan Asplund case. And Lundgren often worked with Göran Fransson, who was Quick's doctor, and the director of the forensic department, Göran Kjellberg. Gunnar Lundgren was a firm believer of the repressed memory therapy, or theory. One of Margit's fundamental ideas was that repressed memories of early childhood trauma contributed to most serious psychological problems. This was a popular theory and became so widespread that patients were asking their therapists to help retrieve memories they didn't recall, as they believed they were victims of abuse. During reconstructions, Quick would often say nomis to suggest to his therapist and others that he had come across something important about the case. Nomis is actually Simon backwards. According to the stories Quick told during therapy about his father, he was sexually abused from the age of 4. During an assault, his pregnant mother came into the room, panicked, and went into acute labour. Quick said that a feast then broke out and his parents started chopping Simon up and forcing him to eat his brother Simon. They then wrapped Simon up in newspapers and buried him in the woods. Quick decided at this point to try and mend Simon, so he became a serial killer to collect body parts in order to mend his brother Simon. And he had access to literature and films in the hospital, including titles such as American Psycho and The Silence of the Lambs, where he got a lot of his memories from. This confirmed the reenactment theory. Quick's child abuse had been reenacted as murders, but the memories of the murders had been repressed because the abuse was repressed. The therapists were able to develop this theory of repressed memories by showing Quick as proof, so he became the number one patient at Serte. However, in 1974, there was a review of all research published on repressed memories dating from 1930 to the 1970s. No scientific valid proof was found that people repress traumatic memories. The same findings appeared in an overview carried out in 1990. In 2000, a Harvard professor conducted a similar review on the retention of traumatic memories and found 10,000 people who had all experienced traumatic events had no repressed memories whatsoever. There have also been studies conducted on false memories that found leading questions and suggestions can help create them. Quick said in the documentary The Confessions of Thomas Quick, "I admitted to the murders because I wanted to be an interesting patient. I wanted to be psychoanalyzed. I wanted to analyze myself. It was comfortable in a way to belong to Birgitte Sture and Margit Norell. There was a convenience. Above all, there was a feeling of belonging. Gradually, I realized that I didn't want to disappoint them. I couldn't stand the thought of letting them down by telling them that I had made it all up. Birgitte was actually looking for a career, but I saw clearly that she was looking for Margit Norell's praise. Birgitte Sture wanted to impress Margit Norell. She felt good when Margit was proud of her." The group behind Quick's investigations, including his therapists, can be likened to a cult. It's a good example of group thinking. Margit Norell was the leader of this group, even though she wasn't present all of the time. Quick also said about Margit Norell, "I understood her aura, her charisma, when she entered the room. It was almost like the tiny woman filled the whole room. I could receive a message from Norell through Birgitte, or if I spoke directly to Norell, she might say, 'Sture, you have to understand that your mother was sick and she probably wanted to eat parts of Simon, right, Sture?' This is how the stories were created, and this is also an example of how quickly these gruesome details were introduced into the stories. The therapists themselves did it. Quick was asked who he thought was responsible for his convictions. He blamed himself first of all, but also Margit Norell. He said it's impossible to exaggerate Margit Norell's importance, and without her, Thomas Quick wouldn't have existed. In 2009, Birgitte Sture sent a report to social services claiming that she did not use recovered memory therapy in her therapy sessions with Quick, and she even said that she had never heard of the method. But when she wrote her book about Quick with Margit Norell, she said that her therapy method was based on the assumption that a criminal's acts of violence mirror past experiences which are hidden inside them. Doesn't this sound like recovered memory therapy? In 2012, the medical director at Serte Hospital denied all knowledge of memory therapy ever being used in the hospital. In 2011, Dan Josephson, who wrote the book The Strange Case of Thomas Quick, tried to get an interview with Göran Kjellberg, but he had passed away. He also tried to meet with Kjell Persson, who had changed his last name and wouldn't speak to anyone concerning Sture Bergwall. He did speak to Göran Fransson, one of Quick's doctors, who was also part of Margit Norell's group. He said that he stopped believing Margit's theories about repressed memories in 1995 when he had attended a lecture given by Elizabeth Loftus. She had published many articles about how repression theory should be regarded as controversial. She stated studies that had been published in the 1980s and one in 1990 concerning concentration camp survivors, and it found that they remembered very well the violence they had been subjected to in the Second World War. Josephson asked Fransson why the revelation came to him in 1995 and not earlier. Fransson said that he was so busy with his work at Serte that he didn't have time to keep up with contemporary research. When he was challenged about the obligation that staff members at Serte should be aware of relevant science, he said, of course. So why didn't he? He could only think of one explanation. He said a professional mindset developed at Serte, which had much in common with a belief system. It was like a sect, and sects don't encourage you to study critical attacks on its beliefs. No need to take on board communications from the outside. And in Dan Josephson's book, he details an interview he had with the memory expert Sven Åke Christiansen. He was the one that testified that Quick's memories were reliable, and also did a reconstruction with him in the hospital grounds for the Charles Zelmanovitz case. And in the interview, he admits seeking out therapy while working with Quick. He asked Birgitta Ståhle for a recommendation, and she referred him to Margit Norell. Christiansen said that they built a strong bond during their therapy sessions, and he described it like a mother and son relationship. So the fact he testified that Quick's version of events in the Stegerhus murders was correct, he was vouching for Margit's theories. He completely ignored the fact that Quick's story kept changing, and the courts trusted Christiansen. All the while, they didn't know that he was under the care of his mother, Margit Norell.
I mean, it is like a cult, isn't it? Basically.
Yeah, it is. Whatever you want to call it is dodgy.
And it's almost like a little pyramid scheme. So you've got Margit at the top.
Yeah.
She's training clinicians with her repressed memory theory. And then staff are receiving the therapy.
And then they're passing that on to their patients.
Yeah. And it's really dangerous. And I told you before that there's a cult at the moment that uses repressed memory theory.
Mm.
There's someone called Teal Swan in America, and she's one of those, like, you know, I don't even want to say wellness, but one of those people that promises that she knows how to fix your life, and she's got all this, and she basically runs a cult.
Yeah.
And there's documentaries and podcasts on her, and she's not licensed in giving therapy or anything. She doesn't have any legitimate qualifications, but she provides therapy, or her cult provides therapy, and they use repressed memory. So there's still people using it to this day. And it's quite, traumatic. As the studies have shown, if someone goes through a traumatic event, generally they will remember it. But, these people are having to believe lies about their own life.
And they fabricate the suggestions that are made during therapy.
Yeah.
And they start believing those as memories. And it creates a whole trauma cycle.
It's very distressing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with this, if I remember correctly, with this cult, they, in the so-called therapy sessions, the victims apparently are forced to act it out. So they're in a group with other people, kind of like what's happening with Sture Bergwall. They're in a group with other people, and the other people are pretending to be the abusers in the past kind of thing.
Yeah. It's like his reconstructions, isn't it?
Role-playing,
yeah.
And it's just so dangerous. But that's what's exactly happened in this case.
Yeah. But she totally had a god complex, this Margit Norell.
Well, that's what happens with a lot of cult leaders, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Christa van der Kwast was promoted in 2005 to chief prosecutor and head of, wait for it, anti-corruption unit.
What? How did he get that?
Oh, yeah. Hannes Råstam interviewed him on the 13th of November 2008. The only cases that could be mentioned in the interview were those of Teresa Johannesson, Jonan Levy, and the Steghuses. Van der Kwast couldn't understand why Hannes Råstam wanted to make a documentary about Quick, as he felt the cases were so old and there would be no way of assessing what Quick might say. Van der Kwast used legal speech to dodge Hannes's questions. He was asked what made him so convinced of Quick's guilt, and he said, he gradually provided information in a number of ways, information that connected him to the victim, knowledge of the victim, so that we could rule out any other possibility than his having been there and in contact with his victims. Van der Kwast spoke about the Thomas Blomgren case and said that he knew Quick was connected to the crime. He said, there was a clear connection between him and the place. According to the medical examiner, everything was explained and nothing was left unexplained. This is despite witnesses suggesting there was another man seen with Thomas who didn't look like Quick. Oh, and Quick had an alibi on the day. which his sister vouched for. They spoke about the murder of the Dutch couple, the Steeghuizes, and about how Quick changed his story dramatically from working on his own to suddenly having an accomplice called Johnny Verbrink. Van der Kwast mentioned Quick's stories emerging, and in reply, Hannes says, "Is it really possible to talk of a story emerging if the original story is completely replaced by a different one?" Hannes then asked Van der Kwast why he allowed Quick to have leave from the hospital while the investigations were underway, to which he replied with cryptic responses and said that they tried to keep tabs on him. Hannes then said about Quick going to the newspaper archives and libraries to look up the case histories, and Van der Kwast replies, "I don't know what he did. Is that what he did?" Van der Kwast became flustered at this point and then didn't seem too bothered that a person being interviewed for murder was out and about researching the cases in the newspapers. Hannes then showed Van der Kwast a photograph of Quick and his twin sister in front of a church in Falun, which was taken on the same day that Thomas Blomgren was murdered. Hannes mentioned that his twin sister was interviewed about this, but the interrogation report was missing in the files. Hannes asked where it was, and Van der Kwast said he would have to ask Seppo Penttinen. Hannes then told the chief prosecutor that Quick had recanted his confessions, and Van der Kwast said, "There's no guarantee that what he's saying now is true, and what he said before was false. I'd be surprised if he claimed he'd been fed the information which led to his convictions."
He says there's no guarantee that what he's saying now is true. But there was no guarantee that what he said in the past was true.
Yeah, and I think I'd rather trust sober Bergwall than drugged up
Yeah.
psychotic Quick, you know. If I had to choose between the two.
Yeah. And I can't believe that they allowed him leave from hospital.
Yeah.
And he was able to travel into Stockholm and to these libraries.
Considering he was supposed to be the most dangerous.
Yeah. Why didn't he have someone go with him at all times? Or someone keep an eye on him? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, if you've got the worst serial killer in the country.
Yeah, in Scandinavia.
Yeah, because he's not just supposedly committing these crimes in one country. He's crossing borders.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's on drugs. So. On the 14th of November 2008, Hannes Råstam interviewed Quick's old lawyer, Claes Borgström. Borgström was working for his own law firm, which he had set up with his partner, the former Minister of Justice. Borgström had invoiced Quick for over 1,000 hours when he represented him in the cases of Therese Johannesson, the Steeghuizes, and Jenon Levy. Hannes brought up the fact that Quick had gained most of his information about Therese Johannesson from the Norwegian newspapers, but Borgström kept arguing with him and saying that he didn't get all of the information from the media. Borgström wasn't interested and kept batting Hannes's questions away. Then Hannes gave him an interesting letter that Quick had written to a Norwegian journalist, Kåre Hunstad, who had supplied him with information regarding his victim, Trine Jensen. In the letter, Quick said that he would do an interview with him as long as he was given 20,000 crowns, which is about £2,000. He also mentioned that his lawyer, Claes Borgström, knew about it. Borgström said to Hannes that Quick was obviously mentally ill or crazy to do this. Isn't that gaslighting?
Yeah.
Hannes then asked him if he was aware of Quick's drug problem, and he said he was not while he was at Säter Hospital. He refused to believe that Quick had a needs-based medication routine and wouldn't answer any more questions on the matter. Borgström was then asked about the Jenon Levy case and about the glasses that were found on the scene. Hannes wanted to know why Borgström had ignored the findings from the lab tests and why he didn't get an opinion from an independent lab. But Borgström didn't really answer the question and said no comment. Hannes then mentioned that Quick had retracted his confessions. Borgström looked anxious and said, "Whatever position Thomas Quick takes in future, neither you nor I nor anyone else will be able to know for certain what has happened here. For the time being, it's the court's rulings that matter. I have not consciously collaborated in putting an innocent person behind bars.
Yeah, you have.
I would disagree with that. Hannes and his research team made an attempt to have the bone fragments released for independent examination. He asked Van der Kust for permission for an independent osteologist to look at the bones, but Van der Kust refused. They also tried to find the missing interrogation report for the police interview with Quick's siblings. Quick's twin sister found a date, time, and the name of the interviewer written down in one of her diaries. This proved the interview took place, and so Hannes and his team contacted Seppo Penttinen and said that it was illegal not to hand over official documents. The team received the interview transcript that same evening. In the transcript, Quick's twin sister describes their upbringing as a mostly positive one. She did mention that she believed her brother had been bullied at school, but she couldn't remember if this really impacted him afterwards. There was still another transcript missing of an interview where Quick's twin sister talks about their confirmation in church, the alibi for Thomas Blomgren's murder. In 2008, Hannes met with the Chancellor of Justice, Göran Lamberts. He was the government's highest-ranking ombudsman. He acted as a legal advisor for the government. It was his role to observe the workings of public authorities and law courts, and to make sure that citizens' rights were protected against abuses of power. He would often comment on the fact that many innocent people had been sent to prison, that police would sometimes lie to protect their own, and that judges were simply not doing their jobs properly. He had also doubted Quick's convictions and was even a supporter of the Asplunds when they said that they didn't believe Quick had killed their son Johan. Lamberts made inquiries into all of Quick's 8 convictions. It only took him a week to come back with a decision in which he claimed, "The verdicts imposed on TQ are in all essential respects very well written and solid. They contain, among other things, extensive descriptions of the assessment of evidence by the courts." He also praised the work of Christer van der Kwast and Seppo Penttinen, who he believed conducted themselves with skill under difficult circumstances. At the time of his decision, he had made enemies with the police, and his future as Chancellor of Justice didn't look good. This perhaps explains why he supported the work of van der Kwast and Penttinen. Hannes asked Lamberts about whether he had been able to review the details of all 8 convictions before his hasty decision, and he said that he only had time to read the verdicts twice. He also had assistants who read parts of the supporting material behind the verdicts. Wasn't he also in the Confessions of Thomas Quick documentary?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. And also, wasn't it quite a junior member of staff that actually read the reports?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he didn't actually look at them with the detail that he should have. He just palmed them off to someone who's not paid enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's all dodgy.
Yeah, not good. Quick's confessions from the psychiatric hospital led him to being convicted for 8 murders. He confessed to 30 murders and disappearances that spanned over a 30-year period. He recanted his confessions during the documentary which aired in December 2008. His lawyer, Thomas Olsen, sent a petition for a new trial for the murder of Jennen Levy in April 2009. Christer van der Kwast was very angry about the suggestion that he and Seppo Penttinen had misled the courts, and said that it was untrue that they had fed information about the murders to Thomas Quick. He was also still adamant that Quick was guilty for all of the murders he confessed to. Van der Kwast said that the documentaries were a low point of journalism, and that journalists didn't have a clue about Thomas Quick. In regards to the African refugee boys, he refused to believe that it showed Thomas Quick was not guilty. Now, if you remember from part 2, it was discovered that both of the missing boys, who were presumed dead at the time, were actually found living. One was living in Sweden and the other in Canada. Van der Kwast said, "What's happening now is a soap opera spectacle. I am counting on the courts, keeping a cool head. There will not be any retrials."
We'll see about that.
Yeah. There were those that supported van der Kwast's views about Quick's guilt. Lennart Högland, the man that Quick had stabbed 12 times in 1974, was disgusted with Hannes Råstam's documentary. The father of the 9-year-old boy that Quick had assaulted in 1969 while working as a nursing assistant felt that Quick was capable of murdering any number of people and that he was a very dangerous man. The Chancellor of Justice, Göran Lamberts, said after the documentaries aired that he was sure Quick was guilty of at least some of the murders and that he has been judged by psychiatrists to be an extremely dangerous person. But then he wrote in an article in January 2009 that Quick had managed to portray himself as guilty by continually modifying his story and behaviour to what was required so that he would be believed. He went on to say, in principle, it is less serious if the legal system convicts an innocent person who has confessed and wishes to be convicted than if it convicts an innocent person who maintains his innocence. Make of that what you will. The Prosecutor General, Anders Perklev, became interested in Quick's case due to 2 civilian reports that were made against Seppo Penttinen and Krista van der Kwast for gross professional misconduct. On the 16th of February 2009, the Prosecutor General decided not to investigate for professional misconduct in Quick's case due to the alleged instances having taken place more than 10 years ago, so they fell outside of the statute of limitations. He did agree, however, that the Office of Prosecution should re-examine all of Quick's judgments. So, the National Authority of Police Court Cases in Malmö put a team together to scrutinise the entire Quick investigation and set up an inquiry.
It's a great pronunciation of Malmö.
Okay, thank you. I was winging it, if you couldn't tell. In Sweden, it is difficult to overturn verdicts once they have been adjudicated. This is part of the legal system process called the principle of immovability. There were only 4 retrials that took place during the 20th century, and now Quick was trying to get 8 convictions overturned.
So his odds are against him.
Yeah, but it also shows how much of a fuck up this case is.
Yeah, it's not only at the police level.
On every level.
Yeah, after he's recanted his confessions, like trying not to allow him to have retrials.
Yeah, and also, I mean, obviously there are people that believe he's guilty, such as his actual victims.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult one because they have every right to think that because they were harmed by him. But then, you know, you'd think in their position, they would wonder why someone like him was given things like leave, as we were discussing earlier, why he was allowed to leave the hospital, why he, you know, if he actually was guilty of all the other 8 murders and whatever else he confessed to, how could the systems let that happen? You know?
And they have to consider that he was high on drugs at the time he committed these offences.
Yeah. Not that the victims are going to care, but he was more high because he had higher dosages and he'd been a long-time user.
It's proven that they do affect behaviour.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's under psychiatric care, which is supposed to protect him. It did the opposite.
No, it's just concerned about the fame they're getting from him.
Yeah, exactly.
In 2008, Hannes Råstam asked Sture about how he found out about Charles Zelmanovitz. He said he saw a newspaper article on how Charles's body had been found. The headline was 16-year-old murder mystery solved. The article headline was wrong. It was actually 17 years since Charles's death, and the article didn't mention the year 1976 at all. And so Sture relied on this information and said that he murdered Charles in 1977, and Penttinen was aware of this error during the interview and asked if he had gotten the year right. Quick's lawyer, Gunnar Larsson, then interjects and says, "It was a bit vague today. I think you and I can work it out in some way later on." The date of the murder was never mentioned in further police interviews after this. Hannes Råstam decided to make a 3rd documentary about Thomas Quick, but put the focus more on the people, such as Seppo Penttinen, Christa van der Kwast, Birgitta Stoller, and others who facilitated the miscarriages of justice. Hannes also tried to track down the other interview transcript between the police and Quick's sister about Thomas Bundgren's murder. When his sister found out about Quick's confession to the murder, she said to the police that he had not left Falun at all during that time. The group behind the inquiry into Quick's convictions demanded that all investigation material held by the Sundsvall police be handed in. In mid-October 2009, Seppo Penttinen sent 2 interrogation reports to Hannes Råstam. One was a transcript of an interview between the police and one of Quick's brothers. The National Authority of Police Court Cases demanded Seppo Penttinen to send in other material, which he had stored away in his study. Hannes went to Malmö to look through this material and found 14 interviews with all of Quick's siblings. All of the stories Quick had said about his abusive parents during therapy sessions were unanimously contradicted. Hannes also found a transcript of an interview between Quick and Penttinen, during which Quick handed over a list of his victims. The name Lars was on the list, who Quick claimed he had murdered in 1965. But Lars wasn't murdered. His death was an accident. He was feeding ducks on a frozen lake, and the ice broke, and he drowned. There was an entry on the list under named youth, who Quick said he abducted them from Norrland in 1985 and took them to Falun, where their body was placed in one of Quick's hiding places. Christa van der Kwast stated to a newspaper at the time that the police knew who the victim was. The victim they connected it to was Magnus Jonsson, who also died in the same way Lars did. He fell through ice and then drowned. On the 17th of December 2009, the petition for a retrial for the murder of Jenna Levy was accepted. The bone fragments found at the Therese Johannesson murder scene had finally been sent to the Swedish National Forensic Centre for analysis. On Thursday, 18th of March 2010, it was revealed that the bones had only gone through a visual inspection before the original trial. In 2010, they were examined at molecular and biological levels, which revealed that they were not bones at all, but believed to be fiberboard due to the presence of wood and glue. Quick's lawyer gave a statement to the press and said, "It's so incredible, even we couldn't have anticipated this, but it's symptomatic of the Quick case, where people of academic repute have offered their services to the whole circus."
I mean...
How incompetent.
Yeah, just no words, really.
It's just unbelievable how they didn't send these bones to outside.
It's worse than the glasses. How could you... I mean, obviously we're not experts in these fields, but how can you get that wrong?
Yeah. Oh. This whole case.
I know.
Not long after this news was released, Hannes Råstam had a debate with the journalist Gub Jan Stigson about the role the media played in the Quick scandal. Stigson still believed that Quick was guilty. In Hannes' research for the documentaries, he discovered that Stigson had written an article about Gry Storvik's murder 10 months before the reconstruction. It was an article in Dala Demokraten, which Säter Hospital had a subscription to, so the newspaper would have been displayed on Quick's ward. The article detailed that Gry Storvik's body was found not far from where Trine Jensen's body was also found. Stigson had actually handed over a number of articles he had on Quick to Hannes when he started his research for the documentaries, but this article wasn't included. So Hannes brought this up during the debate, but Stigson denied knowing any information about Gry Storvik before Quick had confessed. On the 20th of April 2010, Quick's lawyer submitted a petition for a retrial of the Therese Johannesson case. The decision about the Jenna Levy case came a month later in May. Even though the retrial was accepted, a new trial was not scheduled. This was because the evidence did not hold any possibility of corroborating a crime, and on this basis, all charges were dropped against Quick. Christa van der Kwast was not happy about this outcome, saying, "It's an easy way out of a substantial and difficult new legal process." During the summer of 2010, a review into the verdicts for the Trine Jensen and Gry Storvik cases started. The verdict was quashed in 2011. Quick had stayed in contact with Hannes Råstam, and he was planning on writing another book called The Quick Affair, but he was sadly diagnosed with cancer and died 9 months later in January 2012. In March 2012, Quick was acquitted for the Johan Asplund murder. Also in 2012, author and journalist Dan Josefsson interviewed Christa van der Kwast. Dan asked him if it was true that Sture had been confirmed during the time that Thomas Blundgren was murdered. Van der Kwast said that yes, it was true, but that he still had time to fit in the trip to Växjö between the Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. Josefsson then asked wouldn't his family have noticed their 14-year-old child had disappeared on such an important celebration weekend, to which van der Kwast replied, "Normally I would have agreed completely, but Quick isn't normal and his family seemed far from normal." Yeah, all right.
Oh, he's so infuriating. Dan Josefsson interviewed Seppo Penttinen in 2012. He had refused many interviews in the past, but thanks to van der Kwast, Dan Josefsson was able to get in touch with him. They met in Sundsvall and drove around to the spots connected to the Johan Asplund case. Penttinen was still adamant that Quick was guilty. He also admitted to having a therapy session with Margit Norell because he needed an outlet due to the grotesque things Quick would mention in interviews. Penttinen's experience of murder investigations was minimal before he got involved with Quick, and his knowledge of psychology and psychotherapy was even less. He learned everything behind Quick's mental functions through Kjell Persson, Göran Fransson, Sven Åke Christiansen, and Birgitte Ståhle, and Margit Norell influenced them all. Penttinen also committed perjury. He denied influencing Quick in interviews and said that the changes Quick made to his confessions were done spontaneously. It's all a bit incestuous, isn't it?
Yeah, all in it together, aren't they?
Yeah. In February 2013, Thomas Quick, who changed his name back to his real name, Sture Bergwall, received his right to a retrial, and the prosecutor said that there was no technical evidence to place Sture Bergwall at the scene of the crime. Claes Borreström, Bergwall's former defence lawyer, responded to criticism following Hannes Råstam's book, suggesting he knew Quick was innocent. Critics have called for his expulsion from the Swedish Bar Association and even imprisonment, alleging he knew Quick's innocence but acted otherwise. Borreström, who was previously silent on these accusations, expressed deep hurt by the allegations, denying any wrongdoing and asserting his belief in Quick's guilt. On the 26th of November 2013, Bergwall was declared not guilty of the 8 cases he had been convicted for. On the 19th of March 2014, he was released from Säter Hospital with an outpatient program at the clinic. He moved to northern Sweden, and in 2015, the clinic reported that they wanted to end his treatment altogether. In 2017, it was reported that Sture had submitted an application to the Chancellor of Justice for damages of 15 million SEK for being wrongfully detained for 2 decades. His lawyer, Angelica Rigbon, said this was a reasonable amount based on their assessment. Despite the Prosecutor General stating that Bergwall should receive compensation, the Chancellor of Justice has assessed that compensation was not applicable. The Chancellor of Justice's assessment was that it was not the court judgments that caused the deprivation of liberty, giving the explanation, the care he received would have continued even if these judgments had not existed. That is the assessment we have made. The Chancellor of Justice justified its decision to deny Sture Bergwall compensation for the period from the 29th of April 1991 to the 19th of October 2007 by stating that the matter was too far back in time. For the latter part of the period that Bergwall requested compensation for, 20th of October 2007 to the 3rd of March 2014, the Chancellor of Justice had a different justification for why compensation would not be given. The investigation didn't find enough evidence to show a clear link between Bergwall being kept in custody and the decision made by courts for his psychiatric care. This link is necessary for him to receive compensation under the law about being deprived of freedom.
So Sture Bergwall confessed to over 30 murders because he wanted to be interesting and he was lonely. He wasn't in contact with his family very much. He had no friends as such, and the only people he could talk to were all violent criminals. So the only people he could turn to were his therapists. And he wanted to understand himself and his sexuality. The therapists weren't interested in him when he wanted to just fix himself, but they were more than happy to spend lots of time with him when he started to remember childhood traumas that didn't even happen, and then grew more fascinated with him when it turned out he confessed to committing murders to reenact his trauma. False confessions that are made voluntarily are known as Lindbergh confessions. In 1932, Charles Lindbergh's 20-month-old son was kidnapped in New York. There was a ransom, and Charles paid it, but his son was found murdered. It turned out to be infanticide, but more than 200 people confessed to the crime. Another case in America happened in 1983 regarding Henry Lee Lucas, who was caught for illegally possessing weapons. When he was interviewed, he confessed to 600 murders. He was convicted for a number of these and died in prison in 2001. He was examined by a psychologist before his death, who claimed Lucas had a personality disorder and he found lying easier and came across as more believable than other people. He was eager to impress and had a total lack of interest in the long-term consequences of his actions. The psychologist said that Lucas, prior to his arrest in 1983, he was nobody. That is, he had no friends, and nobody listened to him or took an interest in him. Once he began to make false confessions, all that changed, and he has thoroughly enjoyed his celebrity status and now has many friends.
Yeah, I think the multiple personality disorder thing, that was also quite controversial as well, because Sture would sometimes go into Nomis, M for mother, and Ellington. And Hannes, he discusses the controversy around that as well in his book. And he mentions a few other cases where false confessions were obtained.
I just can't believe that they denied him compensation, because if he wasn't encouraged by these therapists to talk about his memories, none of this would have really happened.
Yeah, and because of the way he was, I guess you could say he was groomed.
He was totally groomed.
Because of the way he was groomed, important resources were taken away from actual efforts in finding the real perpetrators of all of these crimes, as well as all that money spent. And because of the time that had then surpassed because he was considered guilty. So you've got all these cases that will probably never be solved now.
They won't be tried, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable, really. we're just stumped by this case.
Yeah, I don't understand how he was allowed to confess to over 30 murders and get convicted for 8 of those. And it comes to the end when he's recanted all of those confessions. And there's still people that think he's guilty, even though there's loads and loads of evidence to say that he didn't do anything.
Yeah, and Johan Asplund's parents didn't even believe that he was guilty.
And Charles Zelmanovich's family didn't believe it either.
Yeah, because the brother's interviewed in the Confessions of Thomas Quick documentary, isn't he?
Yeah. But it turned out that, what they think happened to Charles Zelmanovich was that he, after leaving the party that he was at, he was walking home, and because it was so cold during that time at night, he had very little clothing on. So they they assume that he died of hypothermia.
Yeah. And he was, wasn't he a bit intoxicated as well? He'd been drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your body, I can't remember what it's called, but your body can do really strange things when that goes into survival mode, when you're freezing.
Yeah.
And, they found the fact that it was more likely that his body was dismembered by animals.
Yeah, because they found loads of foxholes nearby, and they assumed that his bones were scattered due to...
I mean, still a really, really tragic way for a young boy to die.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, and just the ridiculousness, like, obviously you've got the 2 African boys that grew up to be men and are still alive, and then the 2 people that fell into ponds or lakes.
Yeah, the 2 young boys, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, this one has stumped me.
And the families of these victims, they have to go through like trauma after trauma.
And for his siblings as well.
Yeah, of course they're all going to be involved. And
they weren't, like, could you imagine if you're reading about your sibling being convicted of, like, being accused of being a serial killer and basically describing a childhood that didn't exist and in really gruesome details.
Yeah.
But no one's listening to you. Not even the police who are interviewing you, but they don't actually give a shit about what you're saying in the interviews.
Yeah, even though you've given evidence of an alibi.
Yeah.
Photographic proof.
Yeah. And he had like, was he from a family? So he had like 6 or 7 siblings. So...
Yeah, so one's telling the truth and 6 others are lying. What? Yeah. Which is it?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, let us know what you thought about that.
Yeah, it was a long one, so well done if you stuck with us.
Yeah, and put up with my awful I've said it before and I'll say it again now. I have a new appreciation for the French language because it's not as difficult as Scandinavian. I thought speaking French was bad.
Yeah. But the beauty of learning the Scandinavian languages is that you can kind of understand the others. So
yeah,
by me learning Swedish, I can now understand quite a bit of Danish and Norwegian.
Yeah.
I'm screwed with Finnish.
All right.
I've got no chance there.
I mean, I know a couple of Estonian words, and I was telling you last week, I can't remember the name of it. There was this comedy on Netflix and it's based in Norway. Lillehammer.
Oh. Yeah.
I was trying to, I don't know why they stopped doing that.
Yeah.
They only had a couple of seasons.
Yeah. I only got through 1 episode and didn't like it.
Oh, right. It is ridiculous. But I was trying to remember how they spoke in that. And that was, I was trying to channel that when I was saying all the names in this episode. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Next episode,
we're going to go to France.
We're going back and forth a lot, aren't we?
Yeah. So we are going to be talking about, I'm trying to remember how to pronounce his name now.
Is it Vjeran Tomic?
Vjeran? I thought it was Vjeran.
Vjeran. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah, I mean, that's a Bosnian name. But yeah, so he's
known as the Spider-Man burglar of France or Paris.
A Spider-Man of Paris, and he committed one of the most audacious heists in modern history. So he robbed some famous paintings from one of the museums. But yeah, so there'll be a bit of French in that. Maybe not as much.
Oh, but... yeah.
But yeah, no, it's quite a cool, not a cool case, but it's quite an interesting one. He's a cool guy, I think.
I think so as well. There's a lot to him.
Yeah.
He's interesting.
He is. So yeah, we'll be in Paris for the next episode.
Yeah, so join us next week. You can subscribe to us on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah. See you next Tuesday.
See ya next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find more information about the show on our website at feloniouspod.com or on our Instagram at felonious.pod.
Links to our show notes can be found in the episode description, as well as through our website and social media. You can visit our Contact Us page and tell us what you think about the show and if there are any cases you would like us to cover. We hope you join us for the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.